There's an article out in The Cable on the website foreignpolicy.com this morning. Headline is pretty interesting. Inside America's plan to kill online privacy rights everywhere. Essentially, the United States and its key intelligence allies, and that would be over in Europe and so forth, they're working behind the scenes to kill off a mounting movement in the United Nations that will promote universal human rights to online privacy. So, in other words, what they're saying is that they're essentially declaring globally our Fourth Amendment right to privacy and to the right to your rights to be safe and secure in your persons, your homes, and your effects. But we are actively working to undermine that movement, which ought to be fairly frightening to the average American. Now, there was a government document, an internal U.S. document that was obtained by The Cable that supports their position on this. It's a diplomatic battle that's playing out right now in a kind of a secret UN General Assembly committee. And they're considering this. This was a proposal that was put forth by Brazil and Germany that was intending to limit or constrain the unchecked internet surveillance by the NSA. Not to mention the GCHQ, which is out of or GCNQ, which is out of England, right? That's their version of the NSA. And American representatives to the United Nations have made it clear that they won't tolerate that kind of limitation on global surveillance. Really? Do you not see the fascist position that our government is taking, not only domestically against us, but against the entire world? This is seeking to contain this international backlash against NSA spying. And as you know, the Brazil president, I talked about this once before, she's obviously working directly on this project, and she's been kind of monitoring it because she's very unhappy about the fact that she was, monitored, and her phone calls were listened to, her emails were read. The Brazilian and German initiative has been started by them, and it applies to the right to privacy. And here's what it affirms. The right to privacy that is not to be subjected to arbitrary or unlawful interference with their privacy, family, home, or correspondence. It does say that public safety may justify the gathering and the protection of certain sensitive information, but that all nations have to comply with the international human rights laws. Now, it's supposed to be presented next week. Actually, I'm sorry, this week. And the resolution is expected to be adopted next week. Excuse me. Now, The Cable got a copy of the draft of this thing, and here's what it states. Quote, to respect and protect the right to privacy, asserting that the same rights that people have offline must also be protected online, including the right to privacy. Now, publicly, the representatives for the United States that are ambassadors to the UN say they're in support of this thing, right? And their quote was, "The United States takes it very seriously, takes our international obligations very seriously, including those under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. We have been actively and constructively negotiating to ensure that the resolution promotes human rights and is consistent with those obligations." That's what they're saying publicly. But here's the problem. On the backside, they're pushing hard to get this thing killed. They're saying we can't have a blockage on extraterritorial surveillance and the mass interception of communications, personal information, and the metadata that isn't just only for foreign countries, but also here in the United States. The problem is, folks, that what we have is a government which has already acknowledged and now taken a conscious active effort towards fascism, a direction to implicate, employ, and expand the police state into a fascist dictatorship. And anyone who doesn't see that is clearly not looking. This is not socialism we're moving towards, with all due respect. Not with this kind of surveillance. If it was just the fiscal policies, then I might be able to buy that. But when I see the wholesale onslaught against our privacy, when I see the government building dossiers on every American, when I see them capturing and passing things like Obamacare, not because they give a darn about whether or not you ever have health insurance, but they're using it as a honeypot. It's a trap. It's a mousetrap to gather more information and data about you. That, ladies and gentlemen, smacks of something far more sinister than just run-of-the-mill socialism. You see, the problem is that they recognize that without the ability to build these massive enemy databases, and that's essentially what they are, they're building a database on everyone so that they can weed out and determine who is part of the ultimate enemy list. And mark my words, there will come a time somewhere in our future, and I don't believe that's going to be a really long window, when this information will be gathered and used and collected and then disseminated out to whatever agency or enforcement arm is going to be the enforcer for this thugocracy, which we have allowed to blossom underneath our very feet. Our enemy is living in our home. They're eating our food. They're reading our mail. They're monitoring us and taking notes about everything that we do in a plot to ultimately destroy us. You can deny that if you want, but I can tell you right now, at some point in time in the future, you're going to have to recognize how far down the rabbit hole we've fallen. This has really gotten over the top in terms of what we can and or should be willing to accept. Now, this UN thing is not legally binding, and it's not enforceable, by some international court. And I don't advocate international courts having sovereign rule over the United States of America. I'm drawing this to your attention because I want you to recognize what Machiavellian machinations they are going through on the back end to subvert not only your rights, but the rights of the rest of the planet. Because believe me, once they've gotten the United States to knuckle under, they're not going to stop there. We are just the pillar holding up the roof of liberty over the rest of the planet. And when we're down, then the rest of them will be easy pickings. That's the point. We are right now living in a period of soft tyranny. And the definition of soft tyranny is what you see when you see a pressure being applied across the board. There's a video I posted up this morning about this guy. It's on our Facebook page and on our website, about a guy the other day who went to pick up his kids at school. And I know this is only one example, and you've seen hundreds of them out there. But if that's not an alarm bell going off in your head, if you're not hearing the klaxon of warning every moment, I don't know what you must have your ears plugged up. This guy, the school passed a new policy that the parents are not allowed on school property, and they got to park, all the way, miles down this road. And at the end of the day, the parents are waiting in some cases for an hour and a half to actually get to the door to pick up their kid. Or their kid has to have a parental release form signed so that the kid can walk to the parent's car a mile away. This guy said, listen, he's my kid. I'm picking him up. I'm not signing off on your stupid release. And that's the end of it. I'm here to get my kid. It's my kid. And the guy was actually arrested. Welcome to your new role. See, you now are no longer a parent. You no longer have control over your family. You're merely a babysitter for the child that belongs to the state. You are expected to pay for their maintenance. You're expected to pay for their upkeep and their food when you're allowed visitation rights to see them in some minor custodial part of the day. In other words, from, let's say, 4 o'clock in the afternoon until 9 o'clock when they go to bed. You get a 5-hour visiting window with them. But you have zero rights and you have zero authority in your own home and over your own children. You have the responsibility to feed them. You have to clothe them. But the state is very clear. Stay out of our way. We, the state, own that child. I'm reminded of an old song I used to listen to by a band called Rush, and it ends with, and it's kind of a dystopian, futuristic song that ends with the following: "We have assumed control. We have assumed control. We have assumed control." Do you not see, ladies and gentlemen, what is happening to this nation of ours? Every vestige of your 10th Amendment, or the Bill of Rights, is being stripped from you. They've passed a law called Obamacare in 2010 that forces you to violate your own Fourth Amendment right and waive your Fourth Amendment right to privacy and security. That right existed from the instant that mankind became sentient. It's a right given to us by nature, natural law, and God. No rule of man, no law passed by man can take that right from you. You have a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, but yet the law passed in 2010 forces you to sign into a website and or sign documents that say all of the information you're supplying to us can be used for auditing, law enforcement, and prosecution. You've just waived your Fifth Amendment right. And you've done it because there's another law that says you must. You cannot have one law that is diametrically opposed to your Fifth Amendment right. No one can make you waive your Fifth Amendment right. You are doing so under duress and coercion. If you were to sit in an interrogation room at a police department and they said, you have the right to remain silent, anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law, and you say, that's okay then, I'm exercising my Fifth Amendment right, I have nothing to say, and someone comes up to you and puts a pistol to your head and says, now you're either talk or we're going to kill you, that's not a voluntary waiver of your right. You've done it under coercion. You've done it under duress. That's essentially what the Obamacare waiver of your Fifth Amendment rights has accomplished. It's what the Obamacare forced waiver of your Fourth Amendment rights has enabled to occur. You're submitting vast quantities of data that are going into these storage vaults that the NSA holds on you in Utah and elsewhere, Fort Meade and all these other locations they've got. The IRS, Social Security Administration, Department of Homeland Security. Do you know that the Obamacare hub interacts with all of those? All of this information is being stored on you. They're capturing and tracking all of your credit card transactions. So they know what books you read, so they know what things you buy, so they know where you travel, so they know what your likes and your dislikes are. What are your political beliefs? What are your ideologies? What are your religious beliefs? Why does government need that, if not for some nefarious purpose, to be used at a later date against you? I rest my case, folks. You don't understand because you refuse to stand up and say, I have had enough. Whether you're doing that out of fear because you don't want to be on a list, or you don't want to be penalized, or you don't want to be the first one to go to jail, or you don't want to be the first one to fall under withering fire, I don't know and or frankly care. What I do know is that we as a nation, unless we are willing to stand up and take control of this government again, we are lost. And the only way that that's going to happen is if we rise up and demand it to be so. Your government has already killed your domestic privacy rights. How do I know that? Well, I'll give you another example. The secret FISA court, this is the spy court that grants the NSA the authority to do what they do. They just came out the other day, and there's a headline on the Washington Times. Spy court says NSA has exceeded their bounds repeatedly, but judges approved all data requests anyway. Did you know that over 500 times since the institution of the Patriot Act, between 2005 and 2011, not a single time has the FISA court said no? Not one. 500 applications submitted, 500 rubber stamped. This is for the obtaining and the monitoring and the securing of records from businesses, bulk telephone, internet data, all of this information. Not one time did this secret court say, you know what, we're turning you down on this one. 1,000 pages of documents were released last Monday that show that even though the court has repeatedly chastised the government for overstepping its authority, not one single time did they rein them in. And that's why our next segment is called Why Checks and Balances No Longer Work. They don't work. The court was there as the weakest member to keep in check the two strongest members, the executive and the legislative. Our founders clearly understood that if ever there was going to be tyranny, it would most often likely start in the executive. And so the judicial and the legislative were put in place to cross-check the executive. And the second risk of tyranny was the legislative. And then the executive and combined the judiciary would be in a place to check that abuse. The National Security Agency, the NSA or agency, quote, exceeded the scope of authorized acquisition continuously during the years of acquisition under these orders. That's the judge's statement from Judge John D. Bates in a redacted, heavily redacted, 117-page opinion. The government has provided no meaningful explanation why these violations occurred, but it seems likely that widespread ignorance of the rules was a contributing factor. I don't buy it. I call that a judicial cover-up for treason. Yes, the word treason. Start using it. Stop hiding behind it. Stop being politically correct, and stop fearfully cowering and sitting in your own defecation and urine. For crimini's sake, America, stand up and fight. This is beyond the pale of imagine if we could raise 20 of the original framers and the makers of this nation from their grave and bring them back to sit here and watch the existence of what we have let happen to this republic. Imagine what they would have to say about us. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we were going to tackle this: why checks and balances no longer work. And that's the reason, ladies and gentlemen, why I fully agree with General Vallely. We are beyond a political solution. I'm not suggesting we shouldn't continue to try. But I think, and I've got a plan for that, and I've talked about this before. I'm asking you to participate with us, to assist us, to drive this thing forward. I'm not some catalyst for it. I can only do what I can do. I'm working within my circle of influence. That's essentially what Vallely was calling for. Everyone to work within their circle of influence. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. You can find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. You can find our Facebook page at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. Even if you're not a Facebook member, you can still read the articles there. If you are a Facebook member, please hit the like button. That helps us to not only share our message with you, but also with your circle of influence. And even if it helps just generate a new topic of conversation, a new flurry of discussion amongst you and your circle of influence, and you have an opportunity to say, to use this, one of our messages that we post up there as a launching pad to say, hey, what do you guys think of this? Get the discussion started. You can also find us on YouTube at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. Share them as often as you can. We'll be right back.